inviting me. I'm going to try to do three things today. I'm basically telling you about a community engaged learning project that I've been working on since 2008 with the Lakeland Community Heritage Project. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the community of Lakeland because I think that's necessary to really understand what we're doing. And then I'll talk about the Lakeland Community Heritage Project, the heritage practices they're developing, and describe the digital archive that we have been creating together using Omeka software. And then finally, if there's time, I'm going to show you some of the projects that my students have done in partnership with the Lakeland Community Heritage Project. So just to orient you, how many people know about Lakeland? Have you heard of the community? Okay, a couple. So this is an early 20th century map, so we're here. And we have Route 1. This is Rhode Island Avenue, but at the time it was the trolley track that connected Howard County all the way with Washington, D.C. This is the B&O Railroad track, which is now also the Green Line. And this little triangular lake is Lake Artemisia. There were some other goldfish ponds there also in the early 20th century, and that's what Lakeland was named after. So Lakeland covers this area here and here. This is Indian Creek. This is Paint Branch Creek. So that'll give you a little bit of an orientation. So basically located across Route 1 from the University of Maryland campus, it's now behind the fire station and the Campus Village Shopping Center. Those buildings used to be Lakeland. That land was taken from the community. So Lakeland was platted in 1890 by a developer, Edwin A. Newman. It was an upper middle class white resort community, initially with Victorian vernacular houses, and the lake being the attraction. It was located just north of College Park, and Newman named the lake after his wife, so Lake Artemisia, and that is the lake of Lakeland. In 1890, Prince George's County was a segregated county with a majority white population. And we can trace African Americans to Lakeland already in 1890. But by 1910, the US Census shows that Lakeland had largely transitioned to an African American enclave, and the whites had left. By 1960, prior to the beginning of the urban renewal process, Lakeland was a very thriving, multi-generational community forged in a pretty hostile, segregated environment of College Park. With a lot of effort and sacrifice, Lakelanders built schools, they educated their children, they sent most of their kids to college. The fact that Lakeland hosted the Black High School for Prince George's County, which is the brick building you see at the bottom, made it kind of the hub of African American communities in the region. So it was kind of a big deal, a lot of social activities. Lakelanders founded and embedded churches as central community institutions. They planned and built their own self-sufficient community, organizing themselves really with bartered skills and services, cooperative efforts, and entrepreneurial service provision to try to maintain at least minimal infrastructure and amenities because they did not get services from College Park or from Berwyn to the north. Many residents purchased their own homes, and they cultivated livestock and gardens, and they used the homes and yards for production as well as consumption. Lakelanders established quite a thriving social scene. They had many social clubs, networks, community halls, establishments where events took place. Children were raised in a kind of it takes a village atmosphere. They were brought up to respect and to serve the elders in the community. Lakeland was a community of extended families. Extended families stretched throughout, were quite close-knit. People shared a lot and did a pretty good job of taking care of neighbors. One resident summed it up. This is Fuel Anthony Douglas speaking. He said, Lakeland was a place that had a lot of people that were loved, accomplished a lot in their lives, had the church as a strong foundation, and kept a positive attitude, end of quote. So Lakelanders recognize their community's extraordinary qualities prior to urban renewal, but they don't really consider Lakeland unique. Their achievements took place within a local context of racism and exclusion, and they were certainly not the only African American community to find their own way within that kind of environment. Lakelanders were unwelcome in most of the commercial institutions in College Park. They frequented the District of Columbia to obtain top shopping services, entertainment. Focusing on Lakelanders' achievements sometimes makes it seem like it was idyllic and it was a perfect community, and it paints a little bit too much of a rosy picture. So I just want to say that Lakeland was and is quite a diverse community. It's a complicated place. It has a significant range of class locations within it, still does, and certainly not everybody agrees on things political and social and otherwise. It's a complex community with a lot of stuff going on. In 1945, Lakeland was formally annexed into the city of College Park, and along with all of the other communities north up to the Beltway. And this definitely brought an improvement in city services on the west side, but it took until 1957 to extend water, sewer, and gas lines over to the east side of Lakeland.
What period of time is this picture? Is that like the 20s, or?
No, this is, well, 50s.
Okay.
In 1961, the City of College Park, working with the federal government, began developing plans for urban renewal for parts of Lakeland. And the plans were filed in 1970 and okayed, and they involved three elements. First was working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to mitigate the serious flooding of Paint Branch Creek. So this is a photograph of Lakeland Road. This is actually the road, not the creek. This is the worst flooding that ever happened. So it's an extreme picture from Hurricane Agnes in 1972. But Lakeland, the lower part of Lakeland near Route 1, flooded pretty frequently. And then second, urban renewal was going to bring raising and redevelopment of the east side of Lakeland on the other side of the Green Line with a higher standard of housing to be rebuilt there. And then raising and redevelopment of the densest section of Lakeland, which was between Rhode Island Avenue and Route 1 for commercial redevelopment, and also the building of low-income housing and townhouses. So at some point in the 1980s, the plans changed, and the decision was made to put the Green Line along the B&O Railroad tracks, and to extract the very high quality of gravel that was on the east side of Lakeland, and to use that to build the foundations of metro stations at Greenbelt and College Park. And after the gravel was excavated, WMATA gave MNCPPC, that's Park and Planning in our region, the land to develop a large nature park. And that is Lake Artemisia Park, much larger lake now, filling all the area where the gravel was extracted. On the west side, the valuable property fronting Route 1, Baltimore Boulevard, was awarded to a developer, Leon Weiner and Associates, for more lucrative commercial development. So urban renewal ended up clearing 2/3 of the geography of Lakeland and displacing roughly 2/3 of the households. So all of the households over here were taken by eminent domain, and this is where Lake Artemisia Park is now. This is Indian Creek, this is Paint Branch. All of this section, this is Rhode Island Avenue, so all of this was taken. And then this section down here was taken a little bit later for the elementary school. So Lakeland lost a lot of geography, about 30 households on the east side, 60 to 70 houses and buildings on the west side, including all of the community institutions and commercial establishments, except for the schools and churches, which are in that central area. Most of the promised housing for Lakeland just never got built, or Lakelanders were not able to move into it. So Lakelanders fought pretty hard to get into those few low-income units and townhouses that were built on the west side, but it took a decade for the development to occur once people were moved out of their houses. And everybody had to find another place to live, and then if you had another place to live, you were put on lower priority for housing because you already had some place to live. So a lot of kind of nasty ironies and catch-22s in there. So there's a letter from a relocated resident that we found in the application files for the new housing, and I'll let you read it. But I think you know, it's a pretty solid way of sizing up what seemed to be going on once we got past the first couple of years of urban renewal, when it seemed like it was going to maybe be a good thing. So the economic losses to households and the destruction of businesses built up over a number of years were bad, but I think the rupture of community culture was really the worst thing of this. This is a photograph of what the west side looked like. This is the part that's been redeveloped for the fire station and Campus Village Shopping Center and other things. So it broke up extended families' ability to check on each other daily, to check on the elders and children, to care for one another. It disrupted the informal economy of the enclave, which was a really important part of how they managed from day to day. It brought an end to Lakeland's elaborate social calendar, which was a network of parades and club meetings and holiday celebrations and debutante balls, partly by relocating people and partly also by eliminating the places where those events had always been staged. Most Lakelanders stayed in the region in Prince George's County, but that multi-generational support structure in one community was gone, and people had been forced to leave the places where 4 or 5 generations of their families had lived. So it was tough. Many Lakelanders still feel a very palpable sense of loss. And here are 2 of them. Both of these women are board members of the Heritage Project speaking. So I want to move on to the second part of what I want to do today and talk about the Lakeland Community Heritage Project. We all abbreviate this as LCHP. And the Heritage Project formed around 2005. And when it did so, 25 years had passed since the sad end of urban renewal. LCHP is an all-volunteer historical society. It's made up of about 3 generations of Lakelanders, some still living there, most displaced. And people formed it because they felt that in 20 years nobody was even going to know about this place. So they felt a strong urge to begin to document the community, the historic community, in order to be able to pass on that heritage to their family members, their children. And so they began to develop heritage practices to document the community, to maintain historical memory, to bring people with Lakeland connections together from time to time, to help each other come to terms with what happened, and to pass that heritage on to their children and grandchildren. And the central activity they established first was Heritage Weekend. It's really a reunion that occurs the 3rd Saturday of every September. People come together for a weekend of fun and food and kind of catching up, and LCHP tries to organize history-oriented events and workshops there as well. A joint church service is held on Sunday of Heritage Weekend, and it's usually very well attended. The churches cooperate in this. LCHP tries to include some kinds of heritage activities. This is a genealogy workshop that took place a couple of years ago. There may be discussions of particular cultural themes in the community, like food or sports. And we usually organize some kinds of collecting activities as well. And it was these collecting activities begun before I became involved with LCHP that really generated the beginnings of the Lakeland Archive. So So another major effort that the Historical Society is taking on is trying to build a digitized archive. And there are some components to this, but I'm going to begin with the website we're developing on Omeka. And so at this point,
What you're doing with graduate or undergraduate students?
both.
As part of their coursework?
But more graduate than undergraduate. So this is the Omeka mother site, Omeka, www.omeka.org. So when our first class began to collaborate with Lakelanders, we started discovering a lot of primary sources because we were documenting the east side, part of that had been destroyed. And we needed a place to put them. And I had just seen a demonstration of Omeka software at Digital Dialogues for Myth. And so I got excited about this and began working with it. So Omeka is an open source program developed by the Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media at George Mason University. I always get that name wrong, but I think that's right. Yeah, it is a long one. It's getting longer. And it's basically a digital collection management system. So if you're familiar with museum software like Past Perfect, it replaces and improves the cataloging and accessioning functions that you can get in those more standard commercial softwares. But it also enables the creation of exhibitions and detailed interpretation of collections in a reasonably user-friendly manner. And it seemed to provide all the functions we needed or could anticipate needing. So I actually cajoled a few years ago Charles Goldman, for those of you who remember Chaz, into adapting this, adapting this and putting it on our server. And I started to use it. So this is what I thought I needed. I think it's sort of worth saying it so you can see all the different things that Omeka can do. So first of all, I needed to store high quality, and as you'll see, some not high quality digitized primary source materials, and in a way that made them relatively easily accessible to my students, to Lakelanders, to LCHP, and to the public. And Omeka had an organized, pretty state-of-the-art protocol for accessioning those items, which I'm going to show you in a minute, and so that was important. It can accommodate a wide variety of sources, scanned documents, maps, photographs, history sound files, video files, a lot of different kinds of things. Omeka encourages collaboration, and it's reasonably user-friendly. There is one of my students, actually, who took the courses here. So there is a little bit of a learning curve to it. Students learn to post sources, retrieve sources, fill in some of the metadata about them. The software gives you a lot of latitude for organizing items into collections so they're more easily found. You can index sources using tagging. Omeka has the capacity to encourage collaborative exhibit making, and we've really taken advantage of that in the classes. And we can work with it as a kind of multi-semester platform to host this ongoing community engaged project for both graduate and undergraduate teaching. And there have been some ups and downs with that, which you're welcome to ask me about in a bit. This is freeware at the moment.
Okay.
It's freeware at the moment. But it takes a little bit of maintenance, and that has been difficult to work out. Right now, Jill Reese is supporting it, but I don't think that's a permanent solution. We're pledged to have conversations about which server in the university or outside of it we will use as a sort of permanent home. The archive is meant to be an ongoing archive for Lakelanders and their children, and I'm going to retire in a few years. Right. So I'm very interested in finding a stable, permanent environment for it. And I would say we have not worked that out yet. So that's an active issue. I have more to say about that, but this is the public face of our collection, and I want to. So if you look here, you can browse items, you can browse collections, you can browse exhibits, you can contribute an item. We could add other things up there, but that's the functionality we have right now. So I want to show you a little bit of what we've done, and I'm going to start with photos, which is where I already was. So we're going to look at items in the photo archive. And I want to show you this one. And I happen to know that this photograph is sideways, so I'm not going to show you the big version because I haven't figured out how to reorient that. But this was a precious photograph because it's photographed in somebody's backyard on the east side, and we do not have very many photographs of what the east side looked like before it was destroyed. And so you can see a group of young women sitting next to a cornfield. There was a lot of gardening on the east side. We know that from oral history. And this is the Brooks sisters. And the three women in the middle are, let me get the names right, Viola, Cecilia, and Gertrude Brooks. And the baby that you can see here is James Edwards III. So Mr. Edwards is a board member, and he's about 70. So we estimate this photograph is during the war years, maybe roughly 1944. And I want to go back up here and sort of show you the Dublin Core. So these are the documenting recording protocols. This one is sparsely populated because it was created by LCHP, and we don't have a lot of extra information about this photograph. But you can see there are fields here for filling in virtually any kind of information that you can think about, and we can customize this too for a particular type of document. We have different information for videos, different information for photographs, and that's all basically built into Omeka, so it's very handy. Dublin Core Metadata Initiative is sponsored by OCLC, the big bibliographic utility that everybody uses now to catalog books as well as other items. And it's the most widely adopted set of standards for digitized collections. And, particularly the elderly cohort who remember Lakeland before urban renewal, they are killer cell phone users, but they are not the computerized generation. So while some know to go there, it's not heavily used at this point. And you know, we're thinking in future classes of doing some cell phone applications that we think might reach a wider group of people as well as the kids. It's used mostly by members of LCHP and some other people who are remote from Lakeland, who have Lakeland connections. And you know, we show it off during Heritage Weekend and other kinds of special events. This is the daughter, Ms. Dorothy Stewart, the daughter of Nellie Stewart, who founded the tavern. The tavern was one of the establishments that was taken during urban renewal and destroyed. So this is Dorothy Stewart with her friend Miss Sarah Jackson, and it gives us a little glance of the interior of the tavern. We have exterior pictures, but not very many interior pictures. So every one of these is precious. LCHP has done quite a bit of photographic collecting, and a much more widely used source than our archive right now is this book. They did an Arcadia Publishing book on Lakeland, and I'm happy to pass it around. I think they did a great job of it. It gives quite a detailed, textured history of the community. Well done. So I want to show another kind of document. So I'm going to go back to, actually, I think I will search for this. So we can search. If we tag things, we can search. So I'm going to search for, Thomas. I'm looking for documents pertaining to the appraisal of the Thomas house, and I think I remember this is on the second page, so we'll see. Right. So you can see here that this, with the Dublin Core, that this document was generated by the City of College Park. It was part of the urban renewal process. It documents the appraisal of the house by urban renewal and the amount of money that the Gilberts were compensated for this house on the east side. And So my students have done quite a few scans of hard copy documents, including quite a bit from City of College Park urban renewal records. And this property and much of the property, I would say, and Lakelanders believe, was lowballed during the appraisal process. The Urban Renewal Authority went through these appraisals very early on in the process in order to set the amount of compensation that people would get for this eminent domain taking of their property. And houses, tended to be photographed in the most unflattering manner, I think, and some Lakelanders are sensitive, pardon me, sensitive about having these documents made public. But Ms. Regina Barton Thomas, who grew up in this house, is happy to let us see this image. You'll see a picture of her in a minute. So one of these was done for each one of the houses on the east and the west side that were taken by eminent domain. And people were compensated and they were moved out very quickly. So people were moved out in the mid-70s, even though the development didn't happen for a number of reasons until the 80s. So pretty tough situation. I want to show you a couple of newspaper clippings. These are things that my students found. And these were pretty spectacular clippings in some way. I'll show you this one. These were articles about fires that took place on April 15th in Lakeland. So I'll get a little bit bigger image of it for you. So remember that Lakeland was founded as a white Victorian resort community, but African Americans settled there along the bottomlands and on the east side from the very beginning. By 1900, the number of African Americans in the community had increased and white flight was beginning. White families were beginning to leave. And many Lakeland families have passed down an oral history story that when whites left Lakeland around 1900, they burned their houses rather than allowing them to be used by African American families, either renters or purchasers. So this was one of the first items that my students found when they started looking into the history of the east side of Lakeland. And we found coverage in both the Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun documenting that 2 fires occurred on April 15th, 1900. And the accounts differ a little bit. The Washington Post is speculating that angry Negroes burned the houses themselves, but of course that's pretty silly because they wanted the houses. And the Baltimore Sun gives a little bit more, kind of neutral coverage here, but definitely documenting the fires. And so when white residents were moving out, they removed their belongings, and then in 2 cases they torched the house and then collected the insurance money rather than have African Americans move into the houses. So when we presented these clippings to Lakelanders during our first community meeting in 2009, there was really just a stunned silence when we showed these clippings. And a tremendous amount of emotion started to pour out. So Lakelanders had heard these stories passed down for generations, but this was the first corroborating documentary evidence. Not that I think you need corroborating documentary evidence for strong oral history traditions, but it really had an impact on people. And I think it helped us really be able to kind of connect with the community and show that some of the research we were doing could be very valuable and provide information that validated some Lakelanders' experiences. So maybe the most important part of collecting and using Omeka for us, and this is the most heavily used part, certainly. There are other things on here. We've done a lot of deed research and property assessment research and things of that sort. But I want to talk a little bit about the oral histories. And I don't think I have enough time to really show an oral let you listen to an oral history. But but I want to talk about them a little bit. And so let's take a look at what these look like. So we have 66 oral histories up here now, and I've been having my students do finding aids or transcripts of the oral histories over time, so that you can go to the sound file. You can go to the sound file and also find out if this is something that you really want to read about. So this is Arthur Dock's oral history. Mr. Dock was in the last class of the high school in 1950 before it closed. Students began to go to Fairmount Heights after that, and the high school became an elementary school. And Mr. Dock was from North Brentwood, so that gives you a sense of the connections between people in African American communities, really up and down the Route 1 corridor. And he gave us an extensive oral history about attending the school and what it was like, the curriculum, the teachers, in connection with a project we did on education in Lakeland. And so you can see the students have provided a pretty detailed account of what you will find in this oral history. It's about an hour and 15 minutes, I think, maybe a bit more. And then the sound file is here. You can listen to it. And I'll just show you one more, which has a complete transcript. This is an interview with Gila Sandage Brooks, also for the education project. Here the students have provided a transcript of the entire interview. And it's a very interesting interview because she went to Lakeland segregated schools through elementary school, and then when she was in about 8th grade, she had to go to Greenbelt Middle School, and she and her sister were the first two African American students at Greenbelt Middle School. And you know, it wasn't a cakewalk. So she talks about the experiences. She also talks about just how different the experience is going to school outside of the community versus walking to her local school, and some of the things that she experienced and her sister experienced from teachers and also from students. So the oral history collecting is something LCHP feels strongly about, we feel strongly about. People are getting older. We don't have all that many Lakelanders who can remember back before urban renewal now. So we've really been putting a lot of emphasis on trying to collect as many stories as we can. So, all right. So I'm going to get out of here and go back to my slideshow.
And this book is excellent, but the thing that you have with this environment is you can continue to grow.
Exactly.
Resources.
Right.
Just
And this is a static resource.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we're hoping to work with younger generations as well and get a broader sense of oral histories. So I'm kind of moving on to the last part of what I wanted to cover now, which is to talk about some of the projects my students have been working on in connection with LCHP. So after Heritage Weekend in the archive, a third heritage practice has been that LCHP has focused on is a more aggressive campaign to try to document parts of the Lakeland story that are in danger of being lost and what it was like on the east side and the west side, those two sections of Lakeland that are gone now. Trying to restore some of that culture to communal memory so that it gets passed down. So we've worked on 5 projects, and the first was a very thorough documentation of the east side. Shin Chen actually contributed to this, so I'll pass that along. This was a historic preservation project, and it was really hard because there is nothing extant on the east side to look at, nothing whatsoever. Maybe a little bit of landscape, but very little. So it was a hard project, and students used all kinds of primary source documentation, including oral histories. The Mr. Edwards, whose baby picture you saw, sat with us for quite a while and drew a map of all of his neighbors on the east side so we could get a sense of who lived where and proximity to one another and where the gardens were and where the barbecue pit was, and all of those good things to really try to make that landscape come alive for us. The second project focused on the theme of education before, during, and after desegregation. And I should say this was actually, what I was showing you was our presentation of the East Side project. And this is Mrs. Regina Barton Thomas of the Thomas House that I showed you the appraisal document for, commenting during the Q&A. So for the education project, we collected oral histories, we did contextual research, and we presented our findings in the form of a 1-hour long video presentation. I like to say if we'd had 2 extra weeks, it would have been a half-hour video presentation, but that's the way it goes. The third project, which is ongoing now, is an effort to study the urban renewal process itself. First of all, to try to create a timeline of what happened, and then maybe going on to try to understand how and why an urban renewal process that really did seem to be crafted to benefit the community just went so bad. And we're still completing the report from our spring 2013 class, hoping to present that to Lakelanders in January, but we did do a presentation to the community. The fourth heritage practice has been a campaign to try and reinscribe Lakelanders' presence and history on the landscapes that have been taken away from them. And so this has taken 2 forms, and it's an ongoing effort. But partly as a result of the 2009 documentation project that we did on the East Side, members of LCHP began lobbying Park and Planning to get some historical markers over in Lake Artemisia so that people using that park can know that there was a community here and learn a little bit about that community's history. For obvious reasons, Lake Artemisia is not the preferred leisure ground for Lakelanders, and the only direct access is through a culvert under the railroad track. There's, because of the 3rd rail, right, you can't cross the tracks now that the Green Line is there. So after some pressure, MNC PPC agreed to fund and put in 2 historical markers, and we're dedicating these here at Heritage Weekend 2011. This is Ms. Mary Holloman, who was very active in trying to advocate for the community when it was clear that urban renewal was going downhill. This is Dr. Joanne Braxton, who grew up on the East Side, and this is Mr. James Edwards from the back. That's what he looks like today. A common response to the markers has actually been a desire for more markers. So our class did a project to develop a walking tour around and a brochure around Lake Artemisia Park. This is what it looks like. So you can kind of see every lit up square was a house and or a school. The school was here. And this is the original triangular lake. It was a man-made lake, and this is the darker outline of Lake Artemisia now. So you get a little bit of a sense. You can actually use this map, and the reverse side of it, as you'll see, talks about 12 or so of the households and gives a little bit of historical background and information. Maybe just a word. I mean, we're kind of hoping the walking tour markers will continue to grow. We're going to try to apply for grants and maybe get a fuller set of markers around Lake Artemisia Park. We'd also, LCHP is interested in putting markers throughout the historic part of Lakeland that's still there, as well as the part that has been commercially developed between Rhode Island Avenue and Route 1. So that might be something that we work on in the future. Yeah, we're thinking about that actually. Yeah, we're thinking about that. That might be a next project. I think that would be a good thing to do. And Emily Aptheker has actually done a little bit of that in connection with a walking tour of Lake Artemisia Park during Good Neighbor Day last April. So that's a great idea. We're also really interested maybe in a cell phone augmented reality project. That would enable us to, sort of photograph a part of the community and then pull up some images of what used to be there. The current project, I just want to say a bit about it. The report we're developing is a timeline. Lakelanders urban renewal is really confusing, and Lakelanders wanted to have a sense just of what the heck happened and when. And so I think we've been able to do a reasonably good job of that. What we don't understand yet is why it happened the way it happened, and that's going to take more research. The City of College Park has been very open in letting us have access to their records. There are just a lot of unknowns. And it's a difficult project. You know, we will go on with this if Lakelanders decide that they want to go on with it. We work collaboratively with members of the community. We do the projects they ask us to do, and we try to represent Lakeland's history in Lakelanders' voices. We don't go in as experts and tell them what's important about their community. We're really trying to model a different way of doing preservation and heritage. So as a result of the work we've done on urban renewal so far, there is a little bit of talk in the community and also with political persons in College Park in the county about considering maybe some kind of a restorative justice project that might help to bring some kind of healing and closure. There's really no way to fix what happened. So reparations in that sense doesn't work, but we're trying to think of something that would genuinely benefit the community, that might be a gesture that would bring some tangible benefits. So that all remains for the future. So these are kind of the dimensions of issues I thought about in connection with developing this project as a vehicle for my students, as well as working out an equitable and respectful relationship with members of the Lakeland community. And I can say more about it if you want to, but I'll basically stop there and see what